r/NoSleep. Posted by u/Dumejig. I was an only child in a town of twins. Back when I was at school I was asked all the time what it felt like to be alone. I am an adult now and have moved away from the small town I grew up in, but the emotional scars remain. Growing up, I lived in a modest house with my mom and dad which was just down the road from my school. I was old enough to walk to school myself. My dad was away with work a lot and my mom held down 2 jobs, cleaning for one of the well-to-do families and a secretarial position. So I guess this suited them as well. It would be fair enough to say I was a solitary child. I spent a lot of time with my head in a book. I loved science fiction best. When I was not traveling to Mars or battling gas monsters on Venus in my imagination, I used to like to walk down to the river and throw pebbles into the water. This was when I was happiest. Being at school was the worst time for me. There were only a few hundred people who lived in town and only one school. There were 13 of us in my class. 6 sets of twins and me. Now, with the hindsight of time and having lived life, I can see this was weird. I looked up the stats just now and there are 33 twins in every 1,000 live births in this country. So there's nothing odd about being an only child, apart from in that cramped room, where I sat by myself at a table near the window. All the others sat in pairs. 3 of the twins were boys, 2 girls and 1 mixed. 2 sets of twins were identical. The others were not. Our teacher was a spinster, in the parlance of those days. She spent most of the school day writing on the chalkboard or reading to us from textbooks. There was never any rowdy behavior for her to deal with. The twins would sit in perfect silence all day long. Having no one to talk to, I did the same. Each pair of twins seemed to be in sync. Opening their books at the same time. Turning pages in one flowing movement. Writing at the same speed. At lunchtime when we took out our packed lunches, I swear they even chewed their food at the same pace. Doing everything differently and on my own I stuck out real bad, and as each endless school day dragged on I could tell I was being stared at. The teacher never said anything about this situation, never extended me a helping hand. I can only assume she saw nothing wrong. And in her defense, it was only as we were filing out of school that anything blatant ever happened. The sets of twins would take it in turns to whisper as they passed me. "What does it feel like to be alone? What does it feel like to be alone?" This only lasted for a minute or so, but every day as soon as I thought I was out of sight of them, I would sprint for home and throw myself onto my bed, bury my head into the pillow and burst into tears. I thought this would never change. The way it did haunts me to this day. They were called Thomas and James Morton. They were identical in every way, as far as I could see. It was a Saturday afternoon in late spring and I had gone down to the river to skim pebbles across the surface of the water. My troubles were not forgotten, but they did seem further away, when I saw them. The Morton twins. They were standing higher up the riverbank looking down at me. I froze. There was a glimmer of darkness in their eyes. Of malice. A smile flickered across their faces as they moved together towards me. I started to back away and I felt cold water lapping at my feet. I was standing in the river. I glanced around, trying to see a way to escape. The other bank was too steep and overgrown with weeds to scramble up. I did not know what the twins wanted with me, but my guts were screaming at me that it was bad. I felt hunted, and very afraid. They kept walking, each step in time. Without really being aware that I moved deeper into the river. It was shallow in places and slow-moving, but soon transformed into a deep, fast-running body of water. A dozen paces away from where I stood, I could see where the river began to flow at speed. I think the Morton twins must have spotted this as well, because they entered the water and stood in front of me, blocking me from the shallows. "What does it feel like," they began in unison, "to be alone? What does it feel like? What does it feel like? Alone. Alone. Alone." As they spoke they inched closer. I kept retreating backwards. I could feel the water rising around my knees. It was getting harder and harder to move. I wanted to cry, to scream out, but there was no one to help me. There never had been. I was alone. They were as one. Suddenly they rushed me. I stumbled, fell. I was not thinking clearly, I did not plan, did not mean for it to happen. I stuck out a hand to cushion my fall and found myself on my backside, the water enveloping me. I felt a stone on the riverbed, lifted it free of the water and lashed out. I did not mean to. I caught one of the twins on the forehead. To this day I do know which one. He cried out in pain and fell forwards, into the river. The flow caught him and he was carried away. Within seconds he was a dozen feet away, 2 dozen, until he reached a pool where the river's flow was stilled, where he remained. He was face down in the water. Was not moving in any way. I had been transfixed by what I was seeing until I heard gasping. I turned around to see the other twin. He was still standing close to me, up to his knees in the water. He was clutching his chest, was clearly struggling to breathe, and then he stopped gulping in air. He just stood there, looking into the distance, at his twin floating motionless in the river. He did not speak to me, did not look at me, as he waded past, as he lay face down in the water and let the flow take him. He did not struggle as he drowned. I could only stand and watch. The current brought him to his brother. Their bodies were silent and still. They were together, as they always had been. As they always will be. I was scared I would spend the rest of my life on my own. The next story of this video. Posted by u/2mejig. I was scared I would spend the rest of my life on my own. I used to work in a laundromat. I handed out change and sold portions of soap powder. I unclogged washing machines and threw out some pretty disgusting things. I listened to lonely people. There was this one lady I remember in particular because she was the first I encountered in the laundromat. She was 50, maybe, plainly dressed. She started crying as she shook a bedding sheet she had just taken out of the dryer. I think she meant to be folding it, to add it to the pile she already had in the blue bag she had brought with her. Only she looked more like she was fighting it as tears ran down her face and she said, "There's no one. I spend all my time alone and never speak to anyone." As suddenly as the tears had begun they stopped. She set her face into a stoic expression, then folded the unruly sheet, put it in her bag and left. I was sitting in my corner seat. I was the only other person in there, so I figured she had been talking to me. I wished after she had gone that I had said something comforting, but I could not think of anything at the time. Being lonely was heartbreaking. I promised myself I would think of what to say before the next time I saw her. I never did see her again. But there were plenty of others. Loneliness is part of the fabric of a city. There are so many people in what feels like constant motion. People who look like they have purpose, success, ambition. That's what it feels like from the outside. If you stand and watch the world pass you by. I grew up in a small town and I already knew what it felt like to be alone. I came to this city for a fresh start, but I was still on my own. In my low moments, I was scared that would never change. It was late in the evening when they first came. The laundromat closed in 15 minutes and the last customer had left. I was sweeping up. The door opened. It was too late to start a new wash, so I was about to tell whoever had walked in they'd need to come back in the morning. When I saw who it was, I froze. It was a boy. I had not seen him since I was a child. But this was impossible, I thought. He could not be here. Then I became aware someone was behind me. I turned slowly around. Somehow, I already knew. An identical boy stood there. A twin. I tried to speak, tried to deny their existence, but could say nothing as they started to move towards me, backing me against one of the machines. A smile rippled across their faces, and as they smiled, water began to trickle from their mouths. It was a brown, filthy liquid, and as it pooled on the floor by my feet I could see maggots wriggling inside it. I looked back up and saw flies crowding in the corner of their eyes, the bloated flesh of their faces as they came closer, reached out. Deadbeat. I started awake to see the laundromat's owner standing over me. He looked furious. I was in a complete daze and could only sit there as he ran it at me. "I pay you to take care of this place. And look at it. While you are fast asleep." I saw the water covering a good swathe of the floor, from where one of the machines had leaked. I thought for a moment he was going to slap me, then he stalked off and returned a moment later with a mop. I cleaned up, and when I had finished he fired me. It was a lousy job anyway, I thought as I walked home. Though what I was going to do next, I had no idea. I had arrived in the city 2 years ago after leaving my hometown as soon as I turned 18. In a way I was a freak in my hometown. A freak because of a freaky situation. I was an only child and all the other children in my class were twins. I have never understood this anomaly. What was very clear to me though was that the twins I shared a class with hated me. Because I was different. They taunted me because I was alone. This vindictiveness led to a terrible tragedy when one pair of the twins tried attacking me while I played by myself on a riverbank. Both of the twins, identical brothers, died. I fled the scene and told no one. The days that followed were the worst in my life. I was in constant terror of being arrested, of being accused of murder, only there was nothing. Life around me went on as normal. I learned later that their dad was in prison, their mom was an alcoholic. Turned out no one had missed the twins, apart from our teacher at school, and no one had paid her much heed at first. The twins' bodies had lain submerged in the river for 4 days before they were finally discovered by a sheriff's deputy. I kept my secret. I moved away. I was badly damaged by what had happened. Alone in the city, I drank. Added pills to the mix whenever I could. I was admitted to hospital for my own safety, taken there by the cops after they found me wandering the streets in an intensely distressed state. I was trying though. I had the job at the laundromat. I was looking at schedules for evening classes at a local college. I was desperate to live a good life. Then they came. The twins I had left lying dead in the river. I knew in my guts that it had not been a dream. I can't explain why. Can't explain any of this. After being fired from the laundromat, I decided not to go back to the small, dirty apartment where I lived. I went to the hospital and asked to be readmitted. They said they could not help me. There were no beds spare. So I walked the streets. I found myself staring at a display in a shop window. Summer fashions. I noticed water pooling around the feet of 2 of the mannequins. Saw how they smiled at me. The rotting, bloated corpses of the twins. I turned and ran. I would go back to the apartment, bolt the door. If I took the subway it would be much quicker. As I sat on the train I saw the twins standing on the platform. They screamed at me as the train rushed past. When I emerged from the subway they were waiting for me on the sidewalk. When I made it back to my apartment they were standing outside the entrance on the street. Then they were on the narrow stairway inside. I had to brush past them. I felt the cold, sodden touch of their skin. I am back in my apartment now. The door is locked, the blinds drawn. I have lost count of the number of days and nights I have been sitting here in the dark. The smell of river water and decaying flesh drifts in from the hallway. And I know now. I am not alone. I will never be alone. For they will always be with me.